The alarms blared throughout the USS Nighthawk as Commander Frank Miller gripped the arms of his command chair. Red emergency lights pulsed across the bridge, highlighting the fear on his crew's faces. "Status report," Miller demanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lieutenant Olivia Grant's fingers flew across her tactical console. "Sir, the alien vessels are positioning themselves around New Haven Colony. Energy readings are off the charts." Miller leaned forward. Just 3 days ago, humanity had its first contact with the aliens who called themselves the Vexari. They arrived in ships that dwarfed anything humans had built, with technology that made Earth's best weapons look like toys. The initial communications seemed promising until the Vexari discovered how relatively new humans were to space travel. "Get me a direct channel to their command ship," Miller ordered. "They're ignoring all hails, sir," Communications Officer Steve Boyd replied, sweat beading on his forehead. The main view screen showed 5 massive Vexari ships, their hulls covered in what looked like shifting metallic scales, surrounding the small human colony on Tau Ceti. New Haven was home to 3,000 colonists, scientists, farmers, and families who had traveled for years to build humanity's farthest outpost. "Sir, they're charging weapons," Grant shouted. Miller stood up. "Shields at maximum, ready our missiles." "Our shields won't stop whatever they're powering up," Grant said, her voice dropping. "I've never seen energy signatures like these." "Dark." Bridge fell silent as the crew watched the Vexari ships emit a pulsing blue light. The light surrounded the colony, growing brighter until everyone on the bridge had to shield their eyes. When they looked again, New Haven was gone. Not destroyed, simply gone as if it had never existed. Even the ground where the colony stood had vanished, leaving a perfectly smooth crater. 3,000 lives erased in seconds. "My God," Miller whispered. Then, louder, "Get us out of here. Maximum speed." As the Nighthawk turned to flee, the Vexari flagship transmitted a message. A tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and 4 eyes appeared on screen. Its voice translated through the ship's computers in a flat, emotionless tone. "This is Supreme Commander Zexatel of the Vexari Dominion. Your species has been evaluated and found wanting. You are primitives playing with technology you do not understand. You have 60 Earth days to remove all human presence from any world beyond your home planet. Any human found in space after this grace period will be eliminated. This is not negotiable." The transmission cut off as one of the smaller Vexari ships broke formation and headed straight for the Nighthawk. "They're pursuing us," Grant reported. "Their weapons are charging." "Pour everything into the engines," Miller ordered, "and Lieutenant Grant, record every bit of data you can about their ships and that weapon they used." Grant nodded, her face pale but determined. "Already on it, sir." The Nighthawk shuddered as the Vexari ship fired a warning shot that deliberately missed them by meters. The message was clear. They could destroy the human vessel anytime they wanted. For 3 tense hours, the Nighthawk pushed its engines beyond safe limits until the Vexari ship finally turned back. By then, Lieutenant Grant had collected terabytes of sensor data on the alien vessels. 2 weeks later, Miller and Grant stood in a packed meeting room at Earth Defense Headquarters in Geneva. Military leaders, scientists, and government officials from every major nation filled the seats, their faces grim as they watched the recording of New Haven's destruction for the 3rd time. Admiral Diane Peters, head of Earth Defense, turned off the display. "That's what we're facing, people. We have 45 days left before they start hunting down every human ship and colony in space. Their technology is at least a century ahead of ours," said Dr. Neil Wong, Earth's leading physicist. "Maybe more. We can't fight them directly, but we can't just surrender space," General Laura Fletcher countered, pounding her fist on the table. "We have 17 colonies and 30 research stations out there, over 40,000 people. Not to mention that once we're confined to Earth, they could wipe us out anytime they want," Miller added. The room erupted into arguments. Some wanted to attempt diplomacy again. Others suggested hiding the colonies. A few desperate voices even proposed a suicidal first strike. As the shouting grew louder, a man sitting quietly in the back stood up. He wasn't in uniform or wearing any government credentials. Miller recognized him as Alan Prescott, a brilliant, but reclusive engineer who had designed some of Earth's best propulsion systems before disappearing from public view 5 years ago. Admiral Peters noticed him too. "Dr. Prescott, you have something to add?" The room fell silent as Prescott walked to the front. He was thin and pale, with the look of someone who spent too much time indoors. But his eyes were sharp and focused. "I've been working on something," he said simply. "A new type of drive. It doesn't just move a ship through space. It moves space around the ship and sometimes through the ship." Dr. Wong frowned. "That's theoretically impossible with our current understanding of physics." Prescott smiled thinly. "Our current understanding is incomplete. I've built a working prototype, though it's only big enough to move. A small drone, but it could be scaled up." "And this helps us how?" General Fletcher asked. "Because this drive doesn't just make a ship fast," Prescott explained. "It makes it strange. It creates effects I'm still trying to understand. The ship exists partially in another dimension while moving through our own. It leaves no heat signature, no radiation trail, and it can move in ways that defy normal physics." He pulled out a small device and projected a video showing a drone-sized object in a test chamber. The object seemed to flicker, becoming transparent, before disappearing entirely and reappearing elsewhere in the chamber. "The Vexari think we're predictable," Prescott continued. "Their sensors are designed to track normal spacecraft, but there's nothing normal about what this drive does." Admiral Peters studied the video with narrowed eyes. "How quickly could you adapt this to a combat vessel? With unlimited resources, maybe 6 months. We have 45 days, Miller reminded them. Prescott nodded. "Then we work faster. And we don't need a fleet, we need one ship, one weapon that can move like nothing they've ever encountered." Lieutenant Grant, who had been analyzing the sensor data nonstop since returning to Earth, spoke up. "From what I've observed, the Vexari rely heavily on predictive algorithms for their defense systems. If we could create something they literally cannot predict." "We need a name for this project," Admiral Peters said, her decision made. Prescott looked at the flickering drone in his projection, watching as it seemed to blink in and out of existence. "Project Reaper," he said softly. "Because if I'm right about what this drive can really do, to the Vexari our ship will move like death itself." 6 months had passed since the Vexari ultimatum. Deep beneath the red sands of Mars, inside a hidden facility carved into Olympus Mons, Alan Prescott stood before the ship that would either save humanity or mark its final failure. The Harbinger didn't look like other spaceships. Its hull curved in strange angles that hurt the eyes if you stared too long. Parts of it seemed to fade in and out depending on how the light hit it. Even sitting still, it gave the impression of movement, like a predator waiting to pounce. "You're late," said Dr. Heather Morgan without looking up from her tablet. Her red hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and dark circles under her eyes revealed weeks of minimal sleep. "The shadow drive keeps shifting its quantum state," Prescott replied, walking over to join her. "I had to recalibrate the anchors again." Dr. Morgan nodded. As the leading physicist on Project Reaper, she understood better than anyone the impossible nature of what they were attempting. The shadow drive didn't just move a ship through space, it moved the ship partly out of reality itself. "Captain Donovan is waiting for you in the simulation chamber," she said. "She's completed 15 runs now. No other pilot has managed more than 3 without neural feedback." Prescott checked his watch. "The Vexari deadline passed 2 months ago. Any news?" "They're being methodical, taking out our furthest colonies first, working their way in. Admiral Peters has evacuated as many people as possible, but we've lost contact with 3 outposts already." The weight of those lives pressed down on Prescott as he made his way through the facility. Project Reaper had been granted unlimited resources. Not that it mattered. The shadow drive couldn't be rushed or mass-produced. Each component had to be grown rather than built, using processes that defied conventional engineering. In the simulation chamber, Captain Lisa Donovan sat inside a mock-up of the Harbinger's bridge. Wires connected her neural interface to the ship's systems. Her eyes were closed, but her fingers moved across the controls with precision. "She's a natural," said Jack Wyatt, the project's chief engineer. Stocky and perpetually oil-stained, Wyatt had been responsible for integrating Prescott's theoretical work into an actual vessel. Watch the hologram. In the center of the room, a projection showed the simulated Harbinger evading 3 Vexari ships. But rather than simply outrunning them, the ships seemed to bend around their attacks, sometimes appearing to pass through solid objects before rematerializing elsewhere. That shouldn't be possible, Prescott whispered. The drive isn't designed to phase through matter. Tell that to the ship, Wyatt replied with a shrug. When Donovan pilots, the shadow drive produces effects we can't explain, and look at this. He pulled up a separate display showing energy readings. See that signature? When the drive is active, it creates what looks like a void in space. Other sensors read it as nothing, not cloaked or hidden, just a spot where nothing exists. Like a moving black hole? More like a hole in reality itself. It gives off no heat, no radiation, no mass readings, nothing. The simulation ended, and Captain Donovan removed her neural interface. She was tall and lean, with close-cropped black hair and the focused gaze of a woman who had spent her life making split-second decisions. Mr. Prescott, she acknowledged with a nod. Your ship flies like a dream and a nightmare mixed together. Not my ship anymore, Prescott said. It's yours now. When can we take it out for a real test, she asked. Prescott exchanged looks with Wyatt. The shadow drive is stable in short bursts, but we haven't tested sustained operation, and we don't know what long-term exposure might do to a human crew. I don't care about the risks, Donovan said firmly. Every day we wait, more colonies fall. Before Prescott could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. A voice came over the speakers. All personnel to emergency stations. Vexari fleet detected approaching Mars. This is not a drill. The 4 of them rushed to the command center where screens showed a dozen Vexari ships entering Mars orbit. They hadn't expected the aliens to reach the inner solar system so quickly. Dr. Morgan was already there, arguing with Admiral Peters on a video link. The Harbinger isn't ready. We need at least another week. You don't have a week, Admiral Peters replied grimly. Earth's defenses are mobilizing, but they won't arrive in time. If the Vexari discover your facility, all our work is lost. Captain, Donovan stepped forward. We launch now. That's suicide, Wyatt protested. So is waiting, Donovan countered. The ship doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to fly. Admiral Peters nodded on screen. Captain Donovan has operational authority. Launch the Harbinger. What followed was controlled chaos as the crew prepared for an emergency launch. The Harbinger's intended crew of 20 was reduced to the bare minimum of 5. Captain Donovan, Prescott, Dr. Morgan, Engineer Wyatt, and Communications Specialist Maya Rodriguez, who arrived breathless from the communications center. The Vexari are sending landing parties, Rodriguez reported as they boarded. They're searching for something specific. I think they know about Project Reaper. Inside the Harbinger, the bridge felt both familiar and alien. Conventional controls were integrated with interfaces designed specifically for the shadow drive, controls that responded to thought as much as touch. How did they find us? Dr. Morgan asked as she strapped into her station. It doesn't matter now, Donovan replied, connecting her neural interface. What matters is showing them what this ship can do. As the massive doors of the hidden hangar slid open, revealing the red Martian sky, Prescott felt a strange mix of pride and terror. The shadow drive was his life's work, but even he didn't fully understand what he had created. Shadow drive initializing, Wyatt called out, monitoring systems that fluctuated between stable and chaotic. Captain, we have enough power for perhaps 3 jumps before we need to recharge. Donovan nodded, her eyes closed as she connected more deeply with the ship. I can feel it, like the ship is part of me, or I'm part of it. On the main screen, they could see Vexari ships descending toward the surface, their weapons already firing at Mars's meager defenses. They haven't spotted us yet, Rodriguez said. Captain Donovan's eyes snapped open, now filled with a strange, shifting darkness that mirrored the hull of the Harbinger itself. They will soon. she said, her voice overlapping with a faint echo. Her hands moved across the controls and the Harbinger lifted silently from its hangar. As the ship rose into the Martian atmosphere, its outline began to blur. To anyone watching, it would appear as if a piece of reality itself was folding, creating a ship-shaped hole in the universe. First jump plotted, Donovan announced. Let's show the Vixari what humanity can do. The Harbinger shimmered once, then vanished. Not with a flash or a boom, but with a silent ripple that moved through space like death itself. The Harbinger emerged from its jump directly behind the largest Vexari ship. For 3 seconds, no one on either vessel realized what had happened. The human crew was still adjusting to the strange sensation of shadow jumping, a feeling like being turned inside out and then reassembled. The Vexari, meanwhile, had no warning that anything was there at all. "Weapons ready," Captain Donovan ordered, her voice steadier than her hands. The jump had left everyone dizzy, but she seemed least affected. "Target locked," Wyatt confirmed from the weapons station. The Harbinger carried just 2 conventional missiles alongside its experimental pulse cannon, a weapon designed to work with the Shadow Drive's unique properties. "Wait," Maya Rodriguez said suddenly, her head tilted as she listened through her communications headset. "The Vexari, I can hear them talking. Their communications are unencrypted." Dr. Morgan looked up sharply. "That's impossible. Their technology is too advanced to make such a basic mistake." "It's not a mistake," Rodriguez explained, her eyes wide. "When the Shadow Drive is active, their communications exist in the same partial dimension we do. I'm hearing them clearly." She paused, listening intently. "They don't know we're here. They're scanning Mars' surface for our facility." Prescott moved to her station, examining the readings. "The Shadow Drive must be creating a quantum field that intersects with their communication frequencies. Can you understand their language?" Rodriguez nodded. "The translation matrix is working. They're confused about something, saying their sensors are picking up a dead zone but can't identify what's causing it." "That's us," Wyatt said, with a grim smile. "We're the dead zone." Captain Donovan didn't hesitate. "Fire the pulse cannon." The weapon discharged not with a beam of light but with what looked like a streak of darkness, a ripple in space that traveled from the Harbinger to the Vexari ship. Where it hit, the alien vessel didn't explode. Instead, a perfect sphere of its hull simply ceased to exist, creating a hole straight through the massive craft. Alarms immediately sounded on the Vexari ship. The other vessels in the fleet turned, scanning frantically for the source of the attack. "They see us now," Donovan said, preparing for second jump. The Harbinger shimmered, ready to vanish again, when suddenly the ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across every console. "The drive is destabilizing," Prescott shouted, fingers flying across his controls. "The jump frequency is out of sync." "Fix it," Donovan ordered calmly, even as 3 Vexari ships fired energy weapons toward their position. Everyone hold on. What happened next would later be described in a dozen different ways by those who witnessed it from outside. The Harbinger didn't move so much as fold, compressing itself into an impossible shape before snapping like a rubber band to a new position. It appeared between 2 Vexari ships just as they fired, causing them to hit each other instead. Inside the Harbinger, the crew experienced something entirely different. For a brief moment, they could see through the walls of the ship, through space itself, into what looked like an endless void filled with threads of light. What was that? Dr. Morgan gasped when reality reasserted itself. "I did it," Donovan said, surprise in her voice. "I could feel the ship starting to tear apart, so I guided it, like folding paper instead of trying to jump." Prescott stared at her in amazement. "The Shadow Drive isn't supposed to work that way. The mathematics doesn't allow for that kind of spatial manipulation." "Math or not, it worked," Wyatt cut in. "And the Vexari are losing their minds. Look." On the main screen, they could see the alien fleet's formation breaking apart. Ships moved in erratic patterns, firing weapons at empty space. Rodriguez listened to their communications, her expression growing more confused. "They're panicking, saying impossible things, that we're Phase wraiths and void demons. One commander is insisting we aren't a ship at all, but some kind of weapon that eats reality. Their sensors must be giving them very strange readings, Dr. Morgan reasoned. It's more than that, Rodriguez said. There's genuine fear in their voices. I think they're terrified of us. A new voice cut through the alien chatter, deeper, more authoritative. Rodriguez translated. Primary. Commander Zextal is ordering all ships to focus fire on our position. They're going to use their primary weapons, the same kind that destroyed New Haven Colony. We can't survive that, Prescott warned. The shadow drive is already unstable. Captain Donovan closed her eyes, her connection to the ship deepening. Then we don't try to survive it, we move through it. That's suicide, Dr. Morgan protested. No, Donovan said with strange certainty. I can see the paths now. The ship is showing me. Before anyone could argue further, the Vexari fleet arranged itself in a circle. Blue energy built between the ships, connecting them like a web of lightning. Lisa, Prescott said urgently, using the captain's first name. Whatever you're planning, do it now. Donovan didn't reply. Her hands moved across the controls in patterns that made no sense, her eyes still closed. The darkness that had flickered in her eyes earlier now seemed to surround her entire body, a shadow that moved independently of any light source. The Harbinger began to vibrate. Not the violent shaking of mechanical failure, but a subtle tremor that seemed to affect reality itself around the ship. The drive is reaching critical resonance, Wyatt reported, his voice tight with fear. Whatever's happening, it's changing the ship's fundamental structure. The Vexari weapon fired, a sphere of blue energy that expanded outward from their formation, designed to obliterate everything in its path. But as it reached the Harbinger, something impossible happened. The human ship didn't dodge. It didn't try to outrun the blast. Instead, as the energy wave passed over it, the Harbinger simply phased out of reality, becoming transparent like a ghost before disappearing entirely. For 10 seconds, there was nothing. The crew experienced a sensation of floating in complete darkness, disconnected from their bodies, from time itself. Then, with a jolt that threw everyone against their restraints, the Harbinger reappeared, inside the formation of Vexari ships, directly next to the command vessel. Impossible, Prescott whispered, staring at the readings. We just moved through solid energy, through a weapon designed to destroy matter itself. On the Vexari command ship, visible through the Harbinger's view screen, alien crew members could be seen staring in shock, their 4 eyes wide with what could only be described as terror. Fire everything we have, Captain Donovan ordered, her voice echoing strangely, as if coming from both her body and from the ship itself. The pulse cannon fired again, joined by the Harbinger's 2 missiles. The combined attack tore through the Vexari command ship's shields as if they weren't there, cutting the massive vessel in half. As the alien ship began to break apart, Rodriguez reported in an awed voice. They're sending a message to their home world. They're saying a human ship moves like death itself, and that death has come for the Vexari. The Harbinger limped back to Mars, its systems failing after the battle. The shadow drive flickered like a dying light bulb, sometimes causing parts of the ship to become transparent. Captain Donovan remained connected to the ship through her neural interface, her face pale and drawn. We need to land now, Wyatt warned from the engineering station. The core is becoming unstable. As they approached the hidden facility on Mars, they could see the damage the Vexari had caused. Half the mountain had been blasted open, with smoke rising from the ruins. But to their relief, emergency shuttles were visible, evacuating surviving personnel. Take us down 2 kilometers east of the base, Donovan ordered. We can't risk exposing the survivors if the drive explodes. The landing was rough. The Harbinger shuddered and groaned as it settled onto the red Martian soil. The moment it touched down, Captain Donovan gasped and collapsed. The neural connection suddenly severed. Dr. Morgan rushed to her side. Her pulse is erratic. We need to get her to medical. They carried the unconscious captain out of the ship. 100 meters away, they finally stopped and looked back at the Harbinger. In the pale sunlight, the ship seemed to pulse with shadows that had nothing to do with Mars's two moons. It's still active, Prescott realized. The drive is running, on its own. That's not possible, Wyatt said. The power core is shut down. Before they could discuss it further, a small transport vehicle approached from the direction of the base. Commander Frank Miller jumped out, looking both relieved and stunned. "We thought you were all dead," he said. "The Vexari hit us hard, but when their command ship was destroyed, the rest retreated." He stared past them at the Harbinger. "Is that what I think it is?" Prescott nodded. "Project Reaper, it works, Commander. Better than we ever imagined." "And worse," Dr. Morgan added, still monitoring Captain Donovan's vital signs. They loaded the captain into the transport and sped toward the emergency medical facilities. As they drove, Miller brought them up to date. The Vexari attack on Mars was just one of 3 simultaneous strikes. They hit the Luna base and the Jupiter station too. Miller's face darkened. "Jupiter station is gone. Luna held, but barely. They're calling what happened here a miracle." "Not a miracle," Prescott said quietly. "Just good science and a captain willing to do the impossible." At the medical facility, doctors took charge of Donovan while the rest of the crew was checked for injuries. Maya Rodriguez sat with a blanket around her shoulders, still shaken. "The things I heard," she said when Miller debriefed her. "The Vexari weren't just surprised by our ship, they were horrified. In their language, they kept using words that translate as abomination and soul eater." Miller frowned. "Seems like an extreme reaction to a new type of drive." "It's more than that," Prescott explained. "The shadow drive doesn't just move the ship, it moves it partially outside normal space. To their sensors, we must appear as a whole in reality, something that shouldn't exist. And we used their fear against them," Wyatt added with a grim smile. News of the Harbinger's success spread quickly. Within hours, Admiral Peters arrived from Earth with a team of scientists and engineers. They set up a secure command center in the remains of the Mars facility. "The Vexari fleet is retreating to the edge of the solar system," Admiral Peters announced in their first briefing. "But our intelligence suggests they're calling for reinforcements." "How long do we have?" Miller asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The Admiral turned to Prescott. "Can the Harbinger be repaired in that time?" Prescott hesitated. "The physical damage, yes. But there's something else going on with the shadow drive. It's evolving." He brought up images on the main screen showing the molecular structure of the drive's core components. The patterns were shifting, rearranging themselves in ways that defied explanation. "It's as if the drive is learning from what Captain Donovan made it do," he continued. "The impossible jumps, phasing through energy weapons. The ship is adapting to make those things standard functions." "Speaking of Captain Donovan," Dr. Morgan said, entering the room with a medical tablet. "Her condition is stabilizing, but her brain scans are concerning. There are new neural pathways forming, similar to the changes in the shadow drive." The implications hung heavy in the air. The ship was changing the captain just as she had changed the ship. 3 days later, as repairs on the Harbinger continued, news arrived from the outer solar system monitoring stations. The Vexari weren't just calling for reinforcements, they were spreading word about the human ship throughout their empire and to other alien species. Maya Rodriguez, now working with the intelligence team, brought the translated messages to the command center. "The Vexari are telling everyone that humans have weaponized death itself," she reported. "They're saying we've created a ship that exists between lives and can unmake reality. Some of their religious leaders are calling us the Endbringers." Admiral Peters studied the reports with a thoughtful expression. "So they fear us now." "Fear is a powerful weapon," Miller observed. "Maybe more powerful than the Harbinger itself." "We should use that," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Captain Donovan standing there. She looked different, thinner, with streaks of white in her black hair that hadn't been there before the battle. But her eyes were clear and focused. "Captain, you should be resting," Dr. Morgan protested. Donovan ignored her, walking to the central display where images of the Harbinger's repairs were shown. "The ship is ready," she said with certainty. "That's impossible," Wyatt objected. We're still replacing half the power couplings. It's ready, Donovan repeated. I can feel it. The room fell silent as everyone exchanged worried glances. Finally, Prescott spoke what they were all thinking. You're still connected to it somehow, aren't you? Donovan nodded slowly. Even without the neural interface, I see it in my dreams. It calls to me. She turned to Admiral Peters. The Vexari reinforcements will arrive sooner than you think, within 5 days, and they're bringing something bigger, a planet killer. How could you possibly know that? Admiral Peters demanded. Because the ship knows, Donovan replied simply. And the ship and I, we understand each other now. After a long pause, Admiral Peters made her decision. Prepare the Harbinger for immediate launch. If Captain Donovan says it's ready, I believe her. As the others filed out to carry out the orders, Prescott stayed behind with Donovan. What's happening to you, Lisa? He asked quietly. She looked at him with eyes that seemed deeper somehow, as if looking through multiple layers of reality at once. I'm becoming what I need to be, she answered. What humanity needs me to be. She placed a hand on his arm. The Vexari fear us because they don't understand us, but I'm beginning to understand them, and all the other species watching what happens here. What do you mean? This isn't just about defending Earth anymore, Donovan said. It's about humanity's place in the universe. The Harbinger isn't just a weapon, it's a message. She smiled faintly. And I'm going to deliver it personally. 5 days later, the Harbinger waited at the edge of the solar system. The ship looked different now, darker, with sections that seemed to fade in and out of visibility, even when the shadow drive was idle. Captain Donovan sat alone on the bridge, the rest of the crew at their stations below. She had requested privacy for what came next. They're here, she said softly into her comm unit. On the screens throughout the ship, the crew watched as space itself seemed to tear open. A massive portal appeared, swirling with blue energy. Through it came the Vexari reinforcements, 20 warships surrounding an enormous vessel that dwarfed even their command ships. The planet killer. All crew to battle stations, Donovan ordered, her voice eerily calm. Navigator Martinez, plot shadow jump coordinates to these exact specifications. In the engine room, Prescott and Wyatt exchanged worried glances as they received the coordinates. These would put us directly in front of their main fleet, Wyatt said. We'd be surrounded. That's suicide, Prescott agreed. But he input the coordinates anyway. After everything they'd seen, he trusted Donovan's connection with the ship more than his own logic. Dr. Morgan monitored the captain's vital signs from the medical bay. Her brainwave patterns are synchronizing with the shadow drive's energy. Fluctuations, she reported. It's like they're becoming one system. In the communications center, Maya Rodriguez listened to the Vexari transmissions. They're scanning for us but can't locate our position, she reported. Wait, they're detecting something near Jupiter's orbit. They think it's us. The Admiral's decoy ships, Miller explained from his tactical station, giving us the element of surprise. We won't need it, Donovan said, overhearing them. They already fear us. Now they need to understand us. The captain closed her eyes, and the ship responded. The shadow drive engaged not with its usual vibration, but with a gentle pulse like a heartbeat. The Harbinger disappeared from its hiding place and reappeared exactly where Donovan had specified, facing the entire Vexari fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. The Vexari ships, surprised by the Harbinger's sudden appearance, held their fire. Captain, Rodriguez called out urgently. The Vexari commander is hailing us directly. They're asking to speak with the death vessel. Put them through, Donovan ordered. On the main screen appeared a Vexari unlike any they had seen before. Taller, with 6 eyes instead of 4, and skin that shifted between blue and gray. Supreme Commander Zextal himself. Human ship, the alien said, its translator making the voice sound metallic. You have violated natural law with your abomination technology. Your species was evaluated and found unworthy of space travel. Yet you persist and pervert the fabric of reality itself. This ends today. Donovan stood from her chair, facing the screen. You misjudged us, Commander. Humans don't accept limits placed by others. We break boundaries. We explore. We adapt. You meddle with forces beyond your comprehension. Zextal replied, Our planet killer will remove your entire species from existence. As if on cue, the massive vessel began to power up, energy building around its equator in a familiar blue glow. I understand more than you think, Donovan said calmly. I understand why you fear us. Your species has traveled the stars for 10,000 years. You've met hundreds of other races, but you've never encountered anyone like us before. She stepped closer to the screen, and those watching noticed how shadows seemed to move around her, as if she existed in multiple places at once. Your weapons scan normal space, she continued. Your ships travel through normal space, but the Harbinger, and now its captain, exist in the spaces between. You call it death. We call it the next step. The planet killer's energy reached its peak, ready to fire. One last chance, human, Zextal warned. Surrender your ship and its technology. Donovan smiled. We don't surrender. We talk. We trade. We make peace when possible. But we don't surrender. She turned to her crew through the ship's internal communication system. Everyone, prepare for dimensional shift. This will feel different. Before anyone could ask what she meant, Donovan placed both hands on the ship's neural interface panel. Her eyes turned completely black, as if filled with the void of space itself. The shadow drive engaged, but not to jump away. Instead, the Harbinger began to expand, not physically, but dimensionally. The quantum field that normally surrounded just the ship started to spread outward, enveloping nearby space. What's happening? Miller demanded as reality seemed to waver around them. She's creating a shadow field around the entire fleet, Prescott realized, watching the readings in amazement. She's pulling all of us partially into the other dimension. The planet killer fired its weapon, a beam of destructive energy that should have annihilated everything in its path. But as it reached the edge of the shadow field, something extraordinary happened. The energy slowed, then stopped, hanging in space like a frozen lightning bolt. Time moves differently between dimensions, Dr. Morgan whispered in awe. She's buying us time to talk. On the screen, Zextal and his crew stared in horror as their ultimate weapon hung useless in space. What have you done? The alien commander demanded. Created a conversation space, Donovan replied, where we can speak as equals without fear of destruction. This is how humans prefer to meet new species, through dialogue, not warfare. Release us immediately. I will. But first, understand what happens next. Donovan's voice echoed strangely, as if coming from multiple places at once. Humanity will join the galactic community, not as your servants or your equals, but as ourselves, explorers, innovators, boundary breakers. You fear what we might become, but that fear is based on your own history of conquest. She gestured to the frozen weapon beam. I could destroy your entire fleet right now. The shadow field could be collapsed, trapping you between dimensions forever, but that's not who we are. The captain took a deep breath, and the shadows around her retreated slightly. I offer you a choice, Commander. Return to your empire. Tell them that Earth and its colonies are protected. Tell them that humans wish to establish peaceful relations with all species. Or continue this war and discover just how far we can push the boundaries of what's possible. For a long moment, Zextal said nothing. Then, almost reluctantly, he bowed his head. We will withdraw. Your species has proven unexpected. The Vexari Dominion will consider your offer of relations a wise choice, Donovan said. Then to her crew, prepare to release the shadow field. As the field retracted, time resumed its normal flow. The planet killer's beam dissipated harmlessly into space. Slowly, the Vexari ships began to turn away. They're retreating, Miller confirmed, watching the tactical display. All of them. A cheer went up from the crew, but Captain Donovan remained silent, her eyes returning to normal as she disconnected from the ship's systems. She looked tired but satisfied. "Captain," Prescott approached her cautiously. "What you did was impossible. The shadow drive was never designed to create a field that large." Donovan smiled faintly. "Maybe that's humanity's gift, Alan. Doing the impossible." She looked out at the stars. "We were never meant to be contained, not by Earth, not by the limits of physics, and certainly not by the fears of other species." As the Harbinger turned back toward home, the crew could see Earth in the distance, a small blue dot protected by a ship that moved like death itself, but carried life's greatest gift, the human spirit of exploration.